But this has been a tough year, and I think for us as attorneys, we're already at the tipping point, and when we're already at the tipping point with our stress, we can be doing well, but all of a sudden something like this can happen, and the resources, and I'm going to say as a person, I'm in recovery. As an attorney in recovery, I can kind of exaggerate the need for some of the things that I normally went to. I need to see people. Lawyers need to see people. We need to see people to process what we're going through. We need to get kind of out of our rumination by talking to other people, seeing other people. And I feel like this year has really opened my mind to all the things that I took for granted, that I didn't realize how much they made a difference. Going out to eat lunch with people, going to coffee without it being a scientific experiment to try to find where to go and all of that. But the daily routines that we had were a big deal. Being able, I'm a parent, I have a 6-year-old. Spending 6 months straight with her without getting a break was really unhealthy. And we love each other, but there's a lot of parents out there that know what I'm talking about. We shouldn't be spending that much time with our children, or we should have more variety. But it's also been difficult in many other ways. Y'all have probably seen this film on Netflix. I highly recommend it, The Social Dilemma. We're already being manipulated by technology, but attorneys, we've used technology in the past as a little bit of an escape. In between, let's say I'm going over to a deposition and I'm sitting in the lobby, I'm going to check Facebook or whatever. We've used it as a filler, but when we become isolated like this, the technology becomes even more overwhelming. And just for some background on technology, most of us get on average 120 new emails a day. That's a study that shows that we're averaging as professionals 120 new emails a day. Most of us, a recent study indicates the average American is getting 94 text messages a day. The average person in the United States is looking at your smartphone 150 times a day. This is unbelievable what this is doing to us. If I went to my mailbox 150 times a day, my neighbor would call the cops on me. But we're doing this, on our phones all the time, and we're spending 24 hours a week on the internet. I think lawyers may exceed that. And actually, during the pandemic, you can check. I've added an hour or two to my daily average on my phone on screen time, and it's part of that may be because I'm checking Twitter to see if I was kidding around. I think I'm gonna weigh 270 before they got to the election of 270, and it's messed up for me personally as a person that used to have a drinking problem. It's messed with my boundaries on eating. I walk into the kitchen at any time and there's the refrigerator, instead of at work where it's just a cooler with some drinks. And so everything that you can think of has gotten complicated. And just to let you know, there was a study on what happens to us with quarantine. And you already heard the stats on our mental health, but a study of 129 people that were, the only thing they were done is quarantined for a couple of weeks. And 28% of them after that quarantine showed symptoms of PTSD, and 31% of them had symptoms of depression. And so this is, as a human, this is an unhealthy situation. And it becomes tedious because, we've lost a lot of our tool. I used to go listen to music. Austin's a great place to do that. And I'd go listen to music. And now people are like, well, come to my Zoom show. I'm so sick of Zoom. By the end of the day, I'm not ready. I don't want to go get on and watch somebody play on Zoom. And so it's complicated, but I do think this is a good time to really confront some of these things that are a problem, like technology, because it's been creeping up on lawyers for years, and maybe now is a time where it's essential to try to look at maybe creating some boundaries with that. How are you guys doing with your technology?
No, I noticed what you're saying, definitely, especially with the election and kind of all the news going on around that. I definitely spent a lot more time on social media, on news sites and all that. And I finally last week just had to put it down and say, I got to set some limits on this because it makes you crazy. And beyond the end of your fingertips, there's not anything on there that I have the least bit of control over. And so, you're just making yourself crazy scrolling up and down news feeds, trying to see something going on that you can't do anything about. It is bound to have a detrimental impact on you. And, particularly, and this is not unique to the pandemic, but I think in the last decade, especially, lawyers have really turned into 24-hour industries because you can find me 24 hours a day. Now, thankfully, a lot of people don't, but that option is there. And I think about people that practiced 20 and 30 years ago, and that wasn't necessarily the norm because you could go home and maybe somebody would call you, but probably not. If they sent you, a letter, it might get in your office in a day or two. It might not, but now it's instant and people expect responses. And that's just kind of the norm that we've created. And it is a very different situation because you're right. I mean, not only do you now miss the ceremonial walking out of your office, but even if you still do that, everything else still goes with you because it's in your pocket.
Yeah, that's right. I'm glad that you mentioned the social network, Chris. It's on my watch list. I haven't watched it yet, but there's a book that I love by an author named Cal Newport, who wrote. He's written a couple of great books, but the one I'm thinking of now is called Digital Minimalism. And I think the social network covers some of the same research that Newport covers in his book because he talks about how the social media platforms are designed to keep your eye glued to them for the benefit of their advertisers, and you're getting dopamine hits by watching to see if someone liked your tweet or your Facebook post or even your LinkedIn post. And I'll tell you, when I read that book for the first time, it scared me, just how pervasive this really is and how all of it's going on. Not to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but this is all kind of happening under our noses. And if we pay attention to screen time, like you mentioned, the function on an iPhone will tell you, how much screen time you've had over a given week on that device. It really is very sobering to figure out how much time you're spending. And so, even though I subscribe to the view definitely that you have to set boundaries, I do that with sort of mixed success on my own. I'm trying not to send emails, during off hours, or respond to emails during off hours. Try to set, pretty reasonable structure to my workday, which really helps. I'm really into trying to develop positive habits right now. I think, once you do that, they can really sort of take over because a habit will help you sort of automate your behavior in a way that will help you avoid some of the negatives here. But like everybody else, election day kind of tanked me. In fact, that whole week I was pretty much shot. It was just a complete Twitter fest. Um, which was, I felt informed, but also I'll tell you, even now, here we are, more than a week later, and it's still a buzz on Twitter, and I find that the messaging going on there, really from either side, is just so negative that it brings you down, and it distracts you. And so I've actually thought about deleting all the social media apps from my phone, which is one of the things that Newport says to do in his book. But that's a really hard step to take.
Well, and one of the suggestions that I've heard that it's almost impossible for attorneys who often have presence with their businesses on some of these platforms, but it's sometimes impossible for us to stay off too much. But I do think if you use your desktop instead of your phone, you're so much less likely to spend a lot of time. And you know what? If you have an emergency, you can always get on Safari and do it the old-fashioned way through the web browser. But
Mm-hmm.
making it harder on yourself to get lost in it is another. Is one thing. One of the things that it seems like some people have suggested that may make some sense is kind of like you do with your refrigerator. If you want to eat healthy, fill it with healthy foods. So delete some of the apps that you struggle with, and maybe put some apps on there that are healthy hobbies of yours. If you like to do escapisms, are sometimes healthy, to get out of what you're, stressing about, video games and music and things that are a little less of that social mental health ego thing. And part of what I think people struggle with as attorneys before social media came along was we're comparative thinkers. We're very concerned about what people think about us, because our art and our trade is to kind of delight a judge into doing what we want, or to persuade a jury to do what we want, or if you're doing an appeal to convince someone. And so we're really concerned about our image. It's part of our business model. And so that's also why we struggle with mental health some, because we don't want to be vulnerable, because being vulnerable in this business can come back to haunt you.